1 year into his presidency, it's become clear that Donald Trump sees the media as his worst enemy, foreign or domestic. That's meant plenty of jibes, insults, and threats coming from the White House in 2017. And for much of the press, a whole new M.O. Adam has more.
I hate some of these people, but I'd never kill them.
If you thought Donald Trump's hostility toward the press would fade after the election, you thought wrong.
These attempts to lessen the enthusiasm of the inauguration are shameful and wrong.
Right off the bat, the brand new administration hammered the media for accurately reporting the size of Trump's inaugural and allegedly ignoring terrorism.
It's gotten to a point where it's not even being reported.
A claim that's demonstrably false. Also drawing the president's ire, leaks involving possible collusion with Russia.
Mr. Trump reportedly floated the idea that Mr. Comey should consider putting reporters in prison.
As 2017 progressed, Trump retweeted an image of himself beating up CNN and made his contempt for the First Amendment abundantly clear.
And it's frankly disgusting the way the press is able to write whatever they want to write.
In response, the press mounted a charm offensive.
A free press isn't the enemy of America. It's a big part of what makes America great.
And increasingly, we talked about the president with a tone that's unprecedented.
Is he fit for office?
He really is not capable of sequential thought.
Of course, Trump's approach to the White House is unprecedented, too.
The Supreme Court, the next justice.
So was that a surprise? Was it?
And once you've been pegged by the president as public enemy number one,
the news is fake.
Old school objectivity is hard to sustain.
You know, I think I had hoped things were going to change after the election. There was no reason to hope that. I had no reasonable expectation. But I thought because the dignity of the office would sort of bring something else out of him, and he would realize he doesn't have to do all this nonsense anymore. But he's really ramped it up instead of dialed it back. And it's disturbing, and I think that's just a fair way of putting it.
We've talked about it enough times on this show that sometimes in our story planning meetings, he will sink to some new low involving going after the media, and we won't want to talk about it because we've become inured to it. We've done it again and again, but looking back at what happened this year, it is amazing the sort of breadth and depth of his hostility. It makes you wonder what the new year is going to hold. It makes me kind of scared about what the new year is going to hold, but as you said, I see no sign he's going to change this approach. He'll probably just intensify it, particularly heading into the midterms. And
just that it was interesting about that Supreme Court thing, because he was playing it like it was a game show. It was like the big revelation. Here it is, the big reveal. You know, who's lost 700 pounds? You know, and that was the.
It's still the way he thinks, right?
I share Adam's concern about what he might do in 2018, but let me push back a little bit against the notion that there's something uniquely awful about Trump and the media, because what he likes to do is run his mouth. And he's constantly denouncing the media and fake news this and I hate you that. But if you look at the history of some of the recent presidents, they've done more in a way that we ought to be concerned about the First Amendment. The Obama administration's pursuit of reporters who had been the recipients of leaks. The Bush administration's suggestion that this was coming from some people in the White House, that the New York Times could be prosecuted for revealing the National Security Agency program. We could go on and on with Richard Nixon. So far, President Trump has been a lot of talk. And my concern for 2018 is he's going to follow up that talk with action. But so far, I think we should be a little bit cautious about describing him as somehow uniquely awful.
Well, he is uniquely awful in this way, because his talk has actually led to female reporters being escorted by his Secret Service to their car, because the threats are so volatile, because it has inspired other people around him. So I think it's not just what he says, it's what now has happened to people who listen to him over and over. In the way that we sometimes are like, really, again, I don't know if I can report it. Now you have people saying, well, it must be fake, because they've heard it over and over and over again, and they're starting to believe it, even though they know, because every poll that we've taken said people trust the media more more than him, but it still comes up this way. So I am concerned in that way that we have already seen action in a way. There's a reason Katie Tur, NBC Reporters, title of her book is Unbelievable. And that is because I've never been in a situation like this before with somebody. Emily, you started off by saying you thought he would change. I didn't think he would change, but you know what I thought would happen? That the people around him who know better, even, I'm talking about people I don't agree with, but they know better, would somehow be able to speak to him and he could hear them. They're, mano a mano or whatever. That just didn't happen.
Yeah, the guy just doesn't listen.
Yeah.
And I think what's changed is that he's in over his head. My first live exposure to Donald Trump was in the late summer of 2015 when I saw him at an event up in New Hampshire where he held court with the press for 45 minutes before his town hall meeting. And I remember just thinking, this guy is brilliant and cunning in the way he's manipulating and exploiting the media. He knew who all the producers for the network crews were. He made sure all the local affiliates got fed. Everybody got a question in. I mean, there was humor, there were quotable lines. It was a brilliant performance. Get him into the White House, and it's not so brilliant and cunning. He's managed to persuade a media, in the case of the White House press corps, that sometimes, regrettably, is too tame and too deferential to power. He's managed to persuade just about all of them to come out fighting, and that has not inured to his benefit, as you point out in the polls that show people have more confidence in the press than they do in him. So it's just been, he's gone from cunning mastermind of how to deal with the media to an abject disaster.
In terms of rising confidence levels in the press, it's worth noting how partisan that is, right? I think it's 74% of Democrats, according to a poll that came out a couple weeks ago, have some degree of confidence in the media, and I think 19% of Republicans do. 60% of Trump supporters agree with the statement that the media is the enemy of the American people. So one thing I do find uniquely worrisome here is whatever he has or hasn't done regulatorily or in the courts, there's the question of whether he's accelerating this trend that we've seen for years of America's division into two camps, at least, that simply cannot agree on the facts we need to agree on to have a beneficial civic conversation.
Don't forget the independents, though. They're the ones that tip the balance
Good point.
in our democracy, and they also tend to favor the press over the president.
And I would follow up with you just to say, Adam, people are now seeing different news. So it's hard to have that conversation and bridge the divide because you can't have, even if you disagree, a conversation because nobody agrees that a tree is a tree.
Let me point to an action that we should be concerned about and will bear watching in 2018. President Trump's Justice Department is opposing AT&T's acquisition of Time Warner, which includes CNN. And, of course, Trump hates CNN with a passion. Now, I don't normally like these kinds of mega deals to combine different corporate media entities together, but by all accounts, the legal argument against this merger is pretty weak, but it looks like the Trump White House is going to push it as far as they can to punish CNN.